وعشان ما يرجع المواطن دارفور يعيش في الوطن. كويس الدارفور صح، السلام هو الواجب في حياة الإنسان، لا بد يكون في السلام، ولكن في بعض الأسباب إذا كان ما قدر المواطن، إذا كان لحق محله، السلام ما ممكن.
مشكلة بتاع دارفور السلام ما بسهولة، وفعلا هسه قتل واغتصاب موجود في دارفور، ولابد كان يبقى السلام ده بصوت اللاجئين، بصوت النازحين في السودان.
أيوة، بداية الصراع أنا ما سياسية ولا كمان محيطة بكل شيء بدقة، لكن الصراع بدأ من عدم العدالة، ما في عدالة ومساواة، في تهميش لأبناء دارفور، تهميش وعدم العدالة. فالمهم خلوا هنا بس، عندنا فعلا نساء دارفور موجودات هنا تقريبا 70 مرأة نجتمعوا ونتكلموا، لكن نسوي شنو؟ ما عندنا حيلة، نتكلموا بعصبية وبحماس، لكن هل صوتنا يا ترى بمشي هناك؟ خلوا هنا وقاعدين.
والله نحن من هنا نناشد المجتمع الدولي عشان يغيروا لنا الوادي ده، ومن أهم المقترحات يعني
والقتل والإبادة، فدي المسؤول الأول هي الأمم المتحدة.
Darfur is a region of Sudan in northeast Africa. Its population made up mainly of subsistence farmers and nomadic or semi-nomadic herders. Darfur has been declared to be in a state of humanitarian emergency since 2003, during which time there's been an ongoing cycle of violence between the non-Arab, black African population of the region and Arab militias. This conflict, which has seen over 300,000 people killed, either in direct conflict or through the effects of malnutrition, disease and violence that come as a result of the displacement of nearly 1.6 million Darfuris within Sudan, and a further 178,000 refugees to Chad, the neighbouring country. The conflict began with violence in 2003 when militants attacked government forces and installations in the Darfur region, accusing the government of President Omar al-Bashir of neglecting the area's development and favouring its Arab inhabitants to the detriment of the black Africans. In response, the Sudanese government in Khartoum, having only a limited military presence in Darfur, launched aerial attacks in support of a local Arab militia known as the Janjaweed, recruited from local tribes. Refugees began to pour into neighbouring Chad as a result of the fighting, leading to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees to appeal for $16.6 million to aid them. In April 2004, the UN Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Department warned of a coordinated scorched earth campaign of ethnic cleansing by the Arab militias in Darfur, and human rights reports showed human rights violations by way of killings, rapes, pillaging, destruction of property, as well as ethnic displacement. Later that same month, the Sudanese government and some of the rebels signed a 45-day ceasefire, and the deployment of African Union observer forces was agreed. This ceasefire was however broken after just 6 weeks, as the sides fell to blaming each other for an attack killing 45 people in a southern village. Meanwhile, UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan ended his official visit to Sudan and warned of catastrophic levels of suffering, pledging UN help for a ceasefire. Oxfam warned of the spectre of disease and a cholera or malaria outbreak at camps in Chad, where heavy rains and limited toilet facilities had caused rapid deterioration in the refugee camps. In May 2006, the government of Sudan began negotiating the Darfur Peace Agreement. However, only one of the 3 main rebel factions took part in the agreement, and it did not end the violence, but was instead to add to the list of unsuccessful attempts at negotiating peace. Finally, in July 2007, the Sudanese government agreed to allow a hybrid United Nations and African Union peacekeeping force into Darfur. This saw the creation of UNAMID, and a mandate including the support and implementation of the Darfur Peace Agreement, the securing of access for humanitarian assistance throughout the region, the creation of an inclusive political process, the protection of civilians and promotion of human rights and the rule of law, as well as monitoring the borders with Chad and the Central African Republic and implementing the Disarmament, Demobilization and Reintegration Programme, or DDR. But how successful can we say the UN African Union peacekeeping forces have been today, in a year in which we have witnessed both a new peace agreement signed in Doha in July, but also, according to Human Rights Watch, a surge in fighting, including government-led attacks on populated areas which has killed and injured scores of civilians, destroyed property and displaced more than 70,000 people since last December. The eventual secession of southern Sudan this year and the end of the brutal civil war which led up to it show that these two regions are aiming to resolve their long-standing differences. But this has also caused many to urge the world to not close the case of Darfur. Conflict in Darfur continues. Is the international community adequately monitoring and responding to events here? UNAMID has had positive effects in Darfur. It has to some extent been able to facilitate humanitarian assistance, including the building of water supplies. Refugee camps are regularly patrolled, and the DDR programme has also had some success, with a campaign in April disarming 1,000 combatants voluntarily in just 10 days and providing them with occupational therapy. However, it's met also with various obstacles in trying to achieve its goals, and while the situation today in Darfur is not on the same scale as it was in 2003 or 2004, the region is still an extremely volatile and unstable one. It's been 7 years now since peacekeepers of the African Union first entered Darfur. Why has more progress not been made? The answer may lie in the existence of multiple rebel factions, not all of whom are adequately involved in peace negotiations. This has been a major factor in their breakdown. For example, it was the fact that only one of the three main rebel groups signed the 2006 peace agreement that weakened it significantly before its eventual failure. Furthermore, the fact the government is seen as supporting the Janjaweed militias furthers distrust among groups such as the Darfur People's Army and the Justice and Equality Movement, who have walked out of peace talks at the government's refusal to disarm the militias. These are not the only problems. Despite being authorised for over 19,000 troops, only approximately 2/3 of this force is on the ground in Darfur. The government in Khartoum has imposed stringent visa requirements and curtailed freedom of movement for peacekeepers and humanitarian aid workers. UNAMID also needs more substantial aerial transportation resources to deliver aid during the rains when terrain can become impassable. This could be addressed by larger contributions from member states. Increased threats to staff also hamper the UNAMID mission. International peacekeeping staff have been kidnapped on multiple occasions, and there have been deaths suffered by both peacekeeping forces and humanitarian agencies, even after the peacekeepers were introduced. Another issue that weakens UNAMID is the fact that the peacekeeping force is not allowed to seize and dispose of illegal arms, but only monitor their use. This has led Amnesty International to present photographs that prove the Sudanese government continues to deploy military equipment in Darfur, in breathtaking defiance of a UN arms embargo, although the Sudanese government has said these photographs are suspect. In July 2011, after talks in Doha, sponsored by the UN, the African Union and the Arab League, the Liberation and Justice Movement signed a peace agreement with the Sudan government, which was welcomed as an important step forward by UN officials. In August, UNAMID convened the first meeting of a ceasefire commission, tasked with maintaining the agreement. If this is successful, then this indeed could be a major step forward. However, it should be noted that the largest rebel group, the Justice and Equality Movement, have rejected the agreement. For a final peace settlement to be reached, it seems the peacekeepers will have to really address the original root causes of the conflict, but first achieve some unity among the rebels, so an agreement can be signed.
ناس قاعدين خلاف المعارضة برضه في ناس قاعدين قاعدة ناس كشيوخ أمات ناس مدنيين سياسيين طبعا قاعدين دارفوريين والناس الحركات برضه عندهم دور والمهم كلهم بيكون على جهة والحكومة المركزية بيكون على جهة وبعد ذاك الأمم المتحدة يكون في النص.
كلها لطاولة مستديرة في نقاش مفتوح، بعد ذاك ممكن يتفقوا في آراء تتفق الآراء وبعد تطبق. ده السلام. كل الجبهات المعارضة دي مع الحكومة يتلموا في طاولة برعاية أي جهة، بعد ده يبحثوا عن المشاكل أو يشوفوا الحلول، بعد تطبق على أرض الواقع.